Hi, welcome to our podcast, Minded, where we are spiritually minded in our discussion, community minded in our mission, and like minded in the hope that we have in Christ. We are so glad that you're joining us yet again for another episode, and you are in for a treat today. I have a guest with me, and I'll let her introduce herself, but we are going to be talking about couples counseling, what that means, what it entails, what it's not, common misconceptions. We're going to just talk about all the things. And so without further ado, we have Adele.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Of course.
Our Minded podcast is about a year old now.
Wow.
And so we're just thankful and grateful that people have been tuning in from episode to episode, and the guests that have come on to either share their testimonies or talk about an aspect of mental health and our spiritual walk and the combining of the two. And it's just been awesome. So Adele, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what some of your specialties are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated in 2017 from University of Maryland, Baltimore. I am a social worker, so I started my career in the nonprofit sector and worked in a agency where it kind of was a hodgepodge, kids, families, adults, couples here and there as well. And then I kind of branched from there and tried to hone in a little bit on my specialty and started working in the private practice sector and started working with some couples. I started doing some trainings for couples therapy, and I still saw some adults. And, COVID happened. So obviously I was dealing with, lots of people that were struggling through COVID times. And then I moved to Annapolis at another private practice. And I do primarily couples counseling now, either with couples or individuals who need some help in their relationship and maybe the partner's not ready to come in yet for counseling.
Okay. And so say again, how long have you been working out of the Annapolis office?
So I'll be there 4 years in November this year.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
hard to believe.
Yeah.
Hard to believe.
So it sounds like obviously you've been there almost 4 years, that you enjoy where you're at and the population of individuals that you serve and doing couples work.
Yes.
So that's what I thought most of the other podcasts that we had, we talked about counseling and mental health in relation to individuals, which is good too.
Sure.
But I thought we would devote some time to exploring and talking a little bit more about couples work.
Yeah.
And so you said that you're a social worker by trade. Are you? Let me see if I can get the credentials right, because I'm an LCPC, licensed clinical professional counselor. Let me see if I get this right. You are an LCSWC,
Yes,
licensed
correct.
clinical social worker.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
All right. So
Lots of letters.
we're sisters, right?
We
in
are.
our licensure.
We
We're
are.
sisters.
We're counterparts,
sisters.
for sure.
And so just like with any counseling, when individuals go to counseling, I tell folks when you go to counseling, it's important to know from what theoretical perspective your counselor is coming from. Like what framework are they utilizing? And I know when you speak today, you're going to be speaking with some things in general about counseling and couples counseling, and then some things might be specific to how you do, but know that there are different theoretical frameworks, different evidence-based practices.
Yes.
And so we're not necessarily going to go over all of them, but we'll talk in some generalities and some specifics.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about when working with couples, some of the theoretical frameworks that you work within that provide you that foundation for addressing their issues.
Yes, of course. So the main framework that I look through and work through is the attachment theory framework. So for those who aren't familiar, Bowlby was the founder of attachment theory work, and Mary Ainsworth did a study where it's about the bond with your primary caregiver, right? So she did a study with infants and did a series of situations where the infant was left alone in a room, and then the caregiver would come back, and they studied what the infant's response was to the caregiver once they came back into the room. And basically what came of that is they found that some infants had a secure bond and attachment with their caregiver, and some infants had an insecure attachment style. And what that really means is that it's based on the consistency and the regular attentiveness to the infant when they have a need, right? So if we have a pee-pee diaper, if we, are, struggling with something and we have a boo-boo, whatever the case is, that's their, bond with their caregiver, and how secure and insecure their attachment was based on that response. So why am I talking about infants right now, right? When we're here to talk about couples, right? But this is where our relationships start.
Yes.
Right? As an infancy. And what they found, not we, I'm not included in that. I wish I was. But what they found is that those attachment styles in infancy influence our adult romantic attachment styles with our, partners. So, I really, it's always been a fascinating theory to me, and there's a ton of research out there that supports that. And there's some evidence-based practices that also kind of piggyback off of those theories about attachment styles that I also, use in therapy. So
yeah, and I think we could do another podcast just on attachment styles, because it is so amazing when you start digging into the type of attachment, because we all have an attachment style. When we start digging into that and how our attachment styles formed in childhood and where there may have been some deficits. And then when we look at our current romantic relationships, I think how it influences our adult relationships and our romantic relationships. Yeah. So maybe that's another podcast.
Yeah, maybe.
So when you're doing couples work, you sometimes will do some work looking at what their attachment styles are and how those deficits impact whatever they're coming to you for.
Yes. So there's a couple. Let me go into some of the evidence-based practices that I use that kind of will help us see how that actually plays out in the therapy room. So one is emotionally focused therapy. So emotionally focused therapy can be with individuals, can be with families, or can be with couples. So it's pretty diverse in that way. And what happens is, we have a hard time sometimes identifying what we're feeling when we're upset. And it really helps to pause in the session and try to identify what you're feeling, feel it in your body, learn how to sit with it, and then express it to your partner adequately and effectively. Because I think sometimes, going back to the attachment theory, right, we can... we throw fits, right? Even as adults, right? We get huffy and puffy.
Adult temper tantrums.
Yes. We frown. We get irritated. We use words we shouldn't, to express those feelings. But then it just goes missed, It gets just, this reaction from your partner. And that may be a part of the pattern of the dynamic, and sometimes it works well, not that it's healthy, but sometimes it works well, that the dysfunctional pattern. And, another type of therapy that kind of goes along with these patterns that we develop in our relationships, and we zone in on what those patterns are and try to identify how we're contributing to them individually. That type of therapy is called relational life therapy. So that's when we look at those patterns. We really want to see what kind of relational trauma we've had in our childhood. So we really do hone in on those experiences in early childhood within the couple framework.
Okay.
And, it's important to note there that the therapist's role in relational life therapy, which is different from some of the other types of therapy, is to help the disempowered partner, right? The partner that is the quiet one, who withdraws, who, doesn't feel like they have a voice or isn't understood. Our role in that scenario is to help that partner kind of come up a little bit and to help the other partner kind of come down. And so it's a really interesting kind of maneuver.
That seems very different than, initially in school when we're going through our classes and counseling and unconditional positive regard and being non-judgmental
Yes.
and being neutral.
Very neutral,
That seems like it's a very different than what some of the other schools of thought are.
Absolutely.
Have you ever had do you explain that up front about how you're
Yes.
going to? Okay.
Yeah, so it's a contract, right? That
Okay.
you develop with that couple to make sure that they are ready for that. Because I think that there's some what we call loving confrontation, right? There's a lot of loving confrontation, and we're talking about trauma. Sometimes it's big T's, sometimes it's small T's, we call them, right? But we talk about some heavy stuff, and so we have to prep the couple to make sure that they're ready for that.
Definitely. I can see where that would draw a lot of emotions, a lot of memories.
Yes.
Especially if they're unresolved
Yes.
memories. And that partner will have to learn. Maybe they didn't know how to sit with that or how to hold that space for their significant other. And that within itself can cause issues and cause the relationship rift. So that's pretty powerful. Wow.
Yeah, really cool stuff.
Let me see. What else? What are some other?
Yeah, there's a couple other types of techniques that I use as well. One is Gottman. So they have a lot of books out there. 7 Principles for Making a Marriage Work. It's a good one. Fight Right. That's another great one. They have a ton of couples therapy research. They literally have a lab where they research couples in arguments and in disagreements. It's really cool. They've coded lots of things.
So
about
before
behaviors.
reality TV, this was what they were doing, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. They were like, "Oh, you go here to the lab, and then we'll evaluate you and see what's going on." But they have some really awesome tools, really awesome skills that we can help couples navigate conflict and learn how to be more emotionally attentive to their partner. Things of that nature. So that's another type of framework that I also use in couples therapy.
And when I was doing a little bit more research, because it had been a while since I'd heard that name, if I think I've got the right one, there was a drawing, an imagery of a house.
Oh, yes.
And
the sound relationship house.
And
yes,
I'm like, I'm a visual person.
Yes.
So I'm like, oh, yeah, because your house, there's some parts that are shaky or the foundation maybe is rocky because of the big T traumas or the little T traumas or the attachment style. So I really like that visual. And do you sometimes use that visual with couples?
So sometimes I will take a little bit more of a structured approach, with, I kind of dabble, in all of them, So sometimes I will take a more structural approach and use the sound relationship house with couples. And, again, the pillars and the walls of that type of approach is, really focusing on trust and commitment in the relationship. We're learning ways to turn towards each other in conflict versus turning away. We're learning ways to be, appreciative and fond of our partner again, that friendship.
Yeah.
Right. So those are some of the things that Gottman, includes in that relationship house that we focus on in therapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any special certifications or special licensures in addition to your social work license?
Yeah. So a newer type of counseling is called discernment counseling. And that really is for couples who are on the brink of divorce and separation, that there's been some rupture, that's been pretty catastrophic in their relationship, and or maybe it's been just years and years and years of lots of disconnection, maybe some anger and resentment that's been built. And regardless of how they've gotten there, that's a certification that I have where we go into discernment counseling and we help the couple pause and gain some insight into themselves individually to figure out kind of, what's my pattern, right? How have I contributed to this situation? What are some barriers that we've had to be able to address these issues adequately? And it's really to help them figure out what is that future path that they really do want to take. And what does couples therapy really, entail?
Okay.
So it's really a way to kind of slow down and assess the situation and see where they want to go next.
So you don't tell them this is what you need to do.
No.
You facilitate this conversation or this exploration about what could happen.
Yes.
And do some people sometimes decide to stay together or give it another try?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a couple right now who they decided to give it a shot. And it's lovely when that happens, you know, for them to be able to realize, okay, you know what, you're right. I think that there are these things about myself that I need to focus on in terms of how do I be a better partner in this relationship and a better person maybe as well. And so some people, you know, do decide to stay in the relationship. Some people decide to separate. So I've had kind of a mixed bag, you know, and again, what's interesting about in the therapist role as a discernment counselor, in that scenario, you have to be very neutral, right? Okay. You know, we're not outcome focused, right? We're not trying to say, woo, do therapy, right? As much as maybe we want to, because we can see more than what they can see, right? But you know, our job is to really remain neutral in that scenario, which it can be tough.
I was about to say, do you find it hard sometimes to be neutral?
Yeah, I do. I think, you know, we all have what we call that counter transference, right? We all have our things, you know, that we've experienced. And there are some couples where I'm like, if you would have just seen it this way, or if you would have just, you know, given it one more little shot for a few months, right? Like maybe I would have been able to turn that coin, right? But it's hard when, you know, sometimes they're coming in and it's that last step. And that's really challenging.
I know it can be very challenging when you see the potential in other people, but they haven't captured it for themselves, and they've made decisions and choices that that is their right to make, you know, their own self-determination.
Absolutely.
But sometimes that can be a challenge to be neutral.
It is.
But I think and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, that, and I don't think we talked about this before, so this is kind of like in the moment. If people are going to a couples counseling and they see that their therapist maybe isn't remaining neutral, and it's not because of a framework, what should they do?
Yeah. So I've had some situations before where couples have come to me and I'm like their third, you know, couples therapist, right? And I've heard stories of, you know, couples therapists who have maybe been a little bit more biased and a little bit more leaning towards a certain direction that they should go in, like divorce or separation, or maybe even, you know, taking a pause of therapy and finding out what they want or whatever the case is, right? Kind of getting more direction there. And I think, you know, again, I get where it comes from, right? And I know that it's hard as a therapist to remain neutral, but that really then puts a lot of pressure on the couple to, you know, take their word for it, right? And say, okay, you know what, maybe you're right, you know? And again, it's like this triangulation effect, right? Of like, well, you know, the therapist is the, you know, the know-all of what that we should be doing, so I guess we should just do that, right? And there's a lot of risks there, right? That again, we're not, who am I to say, right?
Exactly.
That you should take no matter what direction, even if I disagree with it, right? Even if I say, oh, I think you guys could really make it, or I think, you know, you should get divorced, right? Of course, I'm never going to say that,
right? Yeah,
you know.
And unfortunately, like you said, it does happen. And I, you know, when I've had interns where I've supervised, one of the things I share with them, again, this is kind of off topic, but related, that I tell them, you know, it's so important that as helpers, we're aware of our own biases. We all have them.
We do.
We all have them. We can't erase them. We all have our biases about people, about situations, about marriage, about divorce, about family, about many different things. And if we're not aware of our biases, we could do more harm than good, because we have to be aware when we're triggered, or about the boundaries that we have to have. Yeah. So that's equally important for the helper to have that awareness.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, and there have been times, I mean, even prior to doing primarily couples counseling, where, you know, I, you know, said, you know what, you know, I've kind of taken a look at myself and I'm having a lot of issues continuing with this person or this couple, because I don't think I can remain neutral. I don't think I can, you know, you know, separate that countertransference that's happening. And so I've referred out, right? You know, in those situations, it's really, you know, ethical, and, you know, to say, you know what, I think that this isn't the greatest fit, and here are some wonderful resources. And, you know, it's hard to do, again, because we want to, you know, see them succeed, or we want to
fix everybody.
We want to fix it.
Right?
We want to be there for them. But sometimes we have to take a good look in that mirror and say, you know what, maybe I'm not it for them.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think people coming to counseling need to feel empowered that if they are really truly giving it their all and they're finding out that the therapist or counselor is not a good fit for them,
Yeah.
that
Speak
it's
up.
okay to say that and to speak up
Yes.
and to use their voice and to,
Yes.
because it doesn't mean that counseling didn't work,
No.
just maybe the connection wasn't there or the person
Yeah. Or
just
the
had a different
modality.
theoretical framework. Right. The modality was
Right.
different, but to just give it another
Yes.
try. And it's okay to ask those
It
questions.
is. Yeah. I always harp on be transparent. You know, if I don't know, you know, if you know something that I don't know, then that's I'm gonna feel it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I think we go with our gut, you know, in the session, and I'm going to feel something. Right. And so I think sometimes either you naming that or me naming that. Right. And saying, hey, I kind of feel weird today. I don't know what's going on. Can you help me pinpoint that? You know, I think that's a really important conversation to have with any therapist.
Yeah, that is so true. So I'm about to ask you an obvious question. Other than it being one person versus two people, what is the difference between couples counseling and individual counseling? Or
Yeah.
is that approach any different?
Yeah, so yes, I think there's many layers to that. When you
Okay.
come in for, at least again, this is my approach for couples therapy. It's not everybody's, right? So when a couple comes in for me, I see them first for a consultation for about a half an hour to make sure that we're aligned, right? Make
Okay.
sure that we're aligned in terms of fit, but also making sure that I'm assessing, for, their goals and what they want to accomplish. And if I feel like I'm the best fit for that as well. So it's kind of a fit check, right? For
Okay.
both
Okay.
ways. And then we go into the intake session, and that's when both partners are still present, and we just kind of go more in depth. I start to assess more. I kind of, let me see an example or something of some of the issues that you're coming in with, and I sit with both of them in the room. And then I do 2 individual sessions, one with each partner after that. And that again helps me go back into that attachment stuff, right? I start to see what it is, what are the patterns in their family of origin, what are their relationships like with their family, past romantic partnerships, how they
Okay.
shaped, how we've chosen our partner over
Right.
time, right?
Right.
So I really like to assess for those types of things and help them gain some insight into some of that too, right? I think that sometimes we're just like, well, my family was normal, right? But normal is very subjective.
Exactly. What does that mean? What does that mean to
Right. What
you?
does that mean to you?
Right.
Exactly. So that's a really helpful tool that I found in this journey as learning who I am as a couples therapist and how to do it and that sort of thing. So
Yeah. Because go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that's kind of what to expect when you come in.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've never done a lot of couples work.